everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Latest Thread. Today, because in our quilting ideas segment, the quilt that was submitted is a modern quilt, we kind of thought that it might make sense for our topic to discuss today be modern quilting. So that's what we're going to talk about. So I guess to me, I think we could each share, do you make modern quilts? Do you quilt them? I'm sure anyone who quilts for others is getting them to quilt somewhere along the line. Yeah, so let's, who wants to start? Not me.
I'll start. I was challenged to start modern quilting. God, what's that? 3 years ago now, 4 years ago. Jodi said, "Hey, you should make a modern quilt." I did, but it's not my thing. I shouldn't say that. That's kind of mean. It's not my comfort zone. I'll put it that way. But when I do something that's not comfortable to me, I usually do a series. So I've made a second one. And the third one is already planned. So, but it's still
not. And I think I've told you this. I think that you do it very well, even though you don't think that you do.
Yeah. It's because I'm not comfortable there. So how could I think I'm doing something good if I'm not comfortable doing it? So.
And you probably put a little bit more effort into making sure it's just so, because it's not something that you're comfortable with. And then your finished product is even more spectacular, right?
If you say so.
I think it's just who you are as a quilter, I think.
Yeah. I'll show, I'll share a picture with Jodi and I'll be like, "How's it look?" And she's like, "It's awesome." I'm like, "Yeah, didn't you see this and this and this and this and this?"
Oh.
No.
Yeah.
Well, let's see those quilts.
All right. Let's see. Okay. There you go.
Okay. So this was the first one from the challenge. And I just chose to make an improvisationally pieced glacier, because I had a bunch of blue fabrics that were lined up for a glacier quilt. They just weren't supposed to be a modern glacier. So this is what we got. And there was really no planning, and that kind of broke my brain a little, just not planning anything and just letting it land. So then I decided to do the same thing with the quilting and just let it land. So.
Well, I have to say, I find it to be very impressive with the quilting, especially. I like how you quilted more glaciers, but the way you place the quilting designs and the variety of them, it's very subtle, but super effective, I think, with the circle pops and then the lines going in different, directions, and also the scale, that they're in the glacier, you have more not poofier, but, areas. I'm going to say it wrong, I'm sure. But, it's just, to me, totally effective, yet so subtle. It's gorgeous.
Thank you. This is Glacier 2, which is, I guess I was more comfortable with this than the first one, but it's also not improvisational. Like, I knew what was going to happen. So, and it's just strip pieces for the background. And then I appliqued just a white section. That's all one piece, the white section across the center. And then the white is all broken glass. And then Jodi's brilliant help made the background bigger broken glass. So.
And you had to sneak a feather in there, didn't you?
There's no feather in there. That's in my logo.
Oh!
There are no feathers. No, that's just in my watermark.
I like this one. a lot.
Yeah.
And it's the quilting, because I think that the background is so, I always say like tight, like it's, I don't know, you look at it and it's flat and it's, I don't know. I just like that against that puffy center. I like it. It's very clean.
And I did mark all those lines. I listened to Jodi and I marked all those lines in the background. And then I broke my ankle. And when I went to quilt it, they were all disappearing. So
Oh. What did you use to mark it with against all that blue?
oh, I used chalk across the blue and then blue pen across the white. So every line was like I'm flipping pens back and forth between my hand
Mhm.
to see that. And that was the text I sent. I said, whose brilliant idea was this white bar?
Are you just using like a big one of those school chalks, or are you using like a mechanical pencil chalk?
Yeah, the little mechanical pencil ones.
Yeah.
Like these kind, the little tiny.
Yeah. Okay.
It's out of lead.
Mhm.
Out of chalk.
It's
Mine-
interesting, even though it's like a series, you said you have a third one in your head, they're, even though it's a theme with glaciers, obviously, they're totally different. They,
Mhm.
Well, the third one was supposed to be realistic, but I said then it's not truly a series. So once I get to Alaska, it will be based off an actual picture, hopefully, if I ever get there. So
yeah, the first one to me is super impressive.
yeah.
Yeah, improv is not something I can do.
No, and it's like you put the piece down and you're like, okay, I'm not supposed to care, but I really don't like that there. Okay.
Yeah, it's the same reason I can't do a traditional scrap quilt
Mhm.
either.
Oh,
And Sharon, you're like so good at those.
That's
It
my
just
jam.
stresses me out because this fabric's already over here. There's too many. I can't
Oh,
put it there.
The
I just-
quilt that I have, the one quilt that I have that has the most fabrics is 263 different fabrics in
oh my
it.
gosh.
Now, the only way I can do scrappy is like when I worked at the quilt shop and she cut like a slice off of every fabric that came in for the year. And then I just made like rail fences. That I can do because I'm not thinking about it. But no.
But you know what helps with that is I don't quilt by color when I'm doing scrappy. I quilt by value. So I'm not looking at the reds and the purples and the blues and the browns and all of the different color categories. It's all treated as one value. So whatever I pick up, whether it's in that value, then I can use it. So that helps to simplify it a little bit.
Still ain't
And the more fabrics you use, the easier it is for layout because you don't have to stress about what goes beside what, because the more you use, the less chance they are of being
You
side by
say
side.
so. If you say
I find it fun. All right. Who wants to go next? I've got a sneeze coming, so I'm not going next. I'm holding it back.
I'll go since everyone's really anxious to go.
I already went. It's over.
So I like modern quilts. I do. But I do think they're challenging to quilt for sure. It's just different. I think, I think a traditional quilt, not always, but for the most part, they have blocks and they have setting triangles and we know these things, right? So you pick something for the block and you generally pick a border that's complementary or matches. And I think a modern quilt just throws a wrench into that because most often you don't even have those things. And I don't know. It's so for my pictures, this quilt, this was the first modern quilt I pieced. And it was kind of funny because when I made it, I was like, what? That's it? I made it in like 4 hours at the retreat thing. And I'm like, this can't be good. It only took a few hours. But this sat in my drawer for years because I didn't realize how hard it was going to be to quilt it because I didn't know what to do. I mean, I made it because I wanted to use the circle pop on it. That was all I knew. But then clearly I wasn't going to do it everywhere because that was a bit much. So it ended up being what you see there. And what I realized super fast when I started to quilt modern quilts is that I quilt them a lot less. There's less quilting on them than I did on my previous quilts that were more traditional, contemporary, whatever. And it was very weird. But I most of the time started to feel like, but it doesn't need anything else. It was just a really weird thing. And then when I remember I went to enter this in a show and I thought, gosh, I don't think I can enter this. There's not enough quilting. Because what I had entered before, you quilt them to death. And this just wasn't enough to go to a show. But it was okay. And then the next one, kind of over the years, I started to quilt a lot more on them, but it's just different because while this is quilted a lot, I don't feel like you notice it so much. Like it accents the piecing, but it's not really the standout thing, if that makes sense.
It does.
I don't know. I just I wanted to imply movement, and that was my main goal with this. And this quilt in particular, I did not want to quilt because I didn't like it. I like it now, I guess, but I really didn't like it when I made it, and I really didn't want to quilt it. Because if you look at it, the angled things aren't the same size on the top, on the angled part as they are on the bottom. So my grand plan of how I finally came up with wasn't going to work because the width wasn't even the same on the angle as it is on the bottom. So I had to get creative and figure out a way to make that transition not so noticeable.
Yeah.
But in the end, I like it now. But
Do you ever design your quilt based off the quilting idea in your head?
oh yeah, almost always. Mostly. Some part of it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think some of the challenge for those also is, that they're, at least in your case, on this piece here, it's all solids. So, it's a lot more important when you choose your quilting designs, to be effective, because aside from the piecing design, that's what you see. It's so different than if you're working with prints. It's so much more important to choose just the right, combination of designs, I think. But this is one of my favorite quilts of yours. And I think it's, number one of your fabric choices. I am not a blue person at all. But in this case, with the grays or tans, and then that blue, it's just stunning, not to mention, how you emphasize the curves of your shapes with that quilting. It's stunning to me. Truly it is.
One thing I think too that I noticed pretty early on when I started to make some modern quilts was that I like solids. I just do. I mean, I have some prints. I've been using them up like crazy for backings because I just can't bring myself to put it in there because I like that stark contrast. But, a lot of people will say, oh yeah, people like to make modern quilts because there's hardly any pieces and you just throw them together because you want to quilt the heck out of them. But the truth is, if you're going to make a quilt like this, that's all solids, oh my gosh, your piecing has to be perfect because, a print will hide a little bit, maybe if your seams don't match. Well, a solid doesn't. And then it's the same thing with the quilting. There's no,
I wonder if we like solids more because we are quilters, because we want to see like that.
Quilting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
What's the
think
poll
so.
on that?
I mean, yeah, I like to see the quilting. Like that's a lot of time invested, and I would be not wanting to do all that if you couldn't see it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably because we are quilters. We want to quilt a lot.
Because even with my fluffy quilts, I want it to be solid fabric. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that makes this work so well is because you were saying about how the angles, the width of the angle coming down from the angle is different than the width at the bottom. And so they're trying to figure out the transition between those. But I think that even though you've got way more quilting on this one than you did on the last one that we just saw, it doesn't clash because the quilting is moving with the direction of the fabrics. So if you had chose something different for the quilting that was totally not embracing the shape of the space, then I think you would have a lot more busyness going on. And for the amount of quilting that's there, it would be not as restful, but everything flows the same way as the shapes of the fabric, including those ovals in the center. So it feels calm and cohesive, and it makes sense to me because of that. All right.
I'll go next.
Okay, let me find your pictures. There we go. All righty.
All right, so this one was a challenge to myself, working with curved piecing. And just as a disclaimer, I do like modern quilts, but I'm one of those quilters that likes a vast variety of different styles of quilts. Would I make some of them? Never. But I do enjoy making, different types of quilts. So this one was a challenge because I designed it and obviously made it. And we were already talking a little bit how challenging it is to use solid fabrics. Let me tell you, this one, as well as the next one, was a huge challenge for me because you have a big contrast in colors between the dark and the light. And if you, I mean, I don't even remember how many times I took seams apart, and tried to finagle so it looks like it was pieced, correctly. Because, if it's not, number one, it's not done right. And number two, it tends to distort the way the design was intended to be. And so on the solids, it's a lot more noticeable, between the pressing and getting the curves to lay just right where those points meet, truly was a challenge. Is it perfect? Now, probably not, but visually at least it looks like it turned out okay.
This is why I like applique.
Yeah, but sometimes it is good to challenge yourself and try something new, especially with the design process itself, and then choosing the fabrics. This was supposed to be part of a collection of Drunkard's Path quilts, and it was, but this was the one I probably liked least and struggled with most because of the colors. I know Jodi remembers because, she was obviously working on some of those herself. And choosing the colors was hard, and I didn't like this one at all. But I love it now. Um, I also pre-marked all the lines. I wanted to keep the quilting very simple. And I did. I added some things in the gold part. I don't think you can see it on this picture, where it's not just lines, but unless you want to zoom in. So added some pearls just to break it up a little bit. And then the spacing also changed in some of the lines. So, even though it's done very simply and subtle, it still is a challenge to mark all that, because the goal of pre-marking it is to make sure all the angles and the lines come together in order to maintain that effect. And, it took more time to mark it than it did to quilt it, but it's still well worth it because then when you're quilting it, it's more of a, you know, peace of mind because it's already there. So if you screwed up marking it, then yeah, I enjoyed that one a lot and still do.
Ava, is that a black or a dark brown?
It's a dark brown.
I almost feel like I expect this line here to come out and then the bulb meet from corner to corner, but I like that it doesn't.
Well, no, that was actually intentional. There wasn't an oops, honest. It was supposed to be like that.
Yeah, I like it.
It's supposed to be floating, I guess, not be. And that's what I like about the modern quilts because you can make them, so it's not straight on, it's offset, it goes off into the unknown at the edge, you can visualize what might come next, rather than it being placed specifically.
I do like the asymmetry.
Asymmetrical,
Mhm.
yes.
Yeah, I like that part.
And this was another one. I definitely hated that one because I am not a pink person
And she sits in front of another pink quilt.
We gotta get rid of the rest of the fabric.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. And I guess you're right, but I'm not a pink girl by any stretch of the imagination. But again, to me on this one, the fun part was laying it out, because when you essentially they have square triangle blocks, and the options that you have to lay them out in all different ways, to me was the fun part. So yeah, I probably will make more modern quilts. I have made a couple more since then. These are a couple, 3, 4 years old, I'm guessing at this point. But I also enjoy working on traditional quilts. Um, to me, the fun part on those was the designing process rather than using a pattern. And that was a huge challenge to me. To step out of that comfort zone, and do something that's not based on someone else's, work.
My favorite part is, oh, look, it's finished.
That, I survived.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'm last again, so I will go now.
You're going first next time, Sharon.
I think I should be able to get it over with.
Ooh.
So I really struggled to find modern quilts in my quilting room that I have done. And I guess I have done a couple. This is really small. It's only like 40 by 50 or something like that. But it was a pattern that I was going to write called Little Rebel because you can see the little fish at the bottom. He's like buggering off the other direction from everybody else. But as a whole bunch of other things, it gets put on the back burner and I've never written it up. So this is just, and I don't even think that's solid fabric in the background. I don't have a ton of solids. I love prints. So I think it's just a tone on tone. But I played with using a pantograph and then filling in that pantograph just to give the illusion of like water and waves. So there's 2 pantographs. There's this one here that makes the kind of S curl going back and forth. And then this is also a pantograph here, except the pearls were, I added those after the hand just to give movement to this little guy on the bottom. And then it's also in the same behind the mama fish going that way. And inside the busy fabrics, I just did a continuous curve inside there. And then I mixed up some matchsticking and pebbles inside. So I don't know, is that considered, I'm not really a modern quilter, but is it considered modern because of the empty space? I don't know.
Probably.
In
I
your
don't-
world, it's modern for your world. Yeah.
It's modern for me. Thank you. I just feel like there's all these definitions, and do we really have to fit inside any one of those boxes? No, but thank you. That's what it should be. It's modern for me, or, my own stepping towards only solids quilt, which I don't know if I'd ever do, but.
Well, and I think that's kind of one of the cool things about it. Well, or not cool. I mean, just looking at our quilts, how different each of our quilts are, and like, why are they modern? I don't know why. You know what I mean? Because I don't think it's any different though than traditional, right? Because traditional quilts, there's a zillion different styles.
Mm-hmm.
You said that on my second glacier because I'm like, it's not really modern. It's just strata with applique. It's just different words fit different categories.
Yeah, it's very strange. I think why do we have to label it? I think we should just like, if you just make what you love, it is what it is.
Yeah.
The only time it makes any difference is when you try to enter a quilt show, right? I guess you need to know where to put it, but.
Because it can become frustrating, when people like looking at Sharon's quilt, some people may say, well, the fabric she used are certainly not modern, and that becomes limiting then, because if you want to step out of your comfort zone, Sharon, and make something that's different, because you love traditional and reproduction fabrics, then because as you said, the empty space, you find it to be modern, and I think we've gone through all that in quilting history, with the labels and, it should be up to your interpretation, because even as Jodi mentioned with the quilt shows, especially when it comes to a modern category, if they even offer to have one, then, if you read the description, it's very vague. It's, so why label it?
Mm-hmm. I agree. Okay, it's modern for me. That's all. That's good enough.
And I love the quilting. It adds so much movement.
Thank you. So I guess this falls in the same categories. There's lots of prints, but there is some solids in there. And I did not make this quilt, but I did quilt it for a client. And I mean, so do we call certain fabric lines modern? And if you make a quilt with it, is a modern quilt? And again, that's the whole labeling boxing thing.
The fishing quilt would look awesome in the Tula fabrics. Like
the which? The fish. I know. Yeah, because this is that Tula pink line called Catnip, I think. And yeah, so that would have been cute.
I think the most confusion, comes between contemporary and modern. I don't think there's really a big, gap between those two. That becomes, a gray area, so to speak, between those two categories. So, looking at that, I would call that a contemporary quilt, me personally. Is that right? Who knows? But in my mind, that's what I would see as a contemporary quilt because it has fresh, fun fabrics, and then with the quilting added, it has that kind of feel, even though the pattern could lean towards traditional as well, the pattern itself.
Yeah, just by changing the fabrics that are used, right?
But the way this was made and the quilting, in my mind, I would, label it if I was to do so contemporary. So we all have, it's how we define it in our head, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably would say it's modern. it is a very weird thing because yes, the pattern kind of leans traditional for sure, but yeah, and I don't know what it is because I don't think a modern quilt has to be all solids
Mhm.
at all because they're not. I mean, you see people use tons of prints.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I think the whole modern thing is, I don't know. They
Well,
like to put rules
yeah.
and things,
Mhm.
but how can you really do that?
Well, we should just start a movement that's like,
Just make stuff.
there is, yeah, just make quilts, right?
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, the nice thing, I do like solids, but I really like them beside a print. I like the busy beside something more calm, because then you can dress up the solid fabrics with the more fancy quilting and, simplify it in some of the prints. So I like the contrast between the two. I still like the variety. I love variety, like lots and lots of different fabrics. So this one in particular there's solids, but there's also the prints for interest. So there. And I don't do a ton. Like, I think that as a quilter for other people, you have to be somewhat versatile. And we do get, I'm sure we've all had quilts brought to us that people have said, can you quilt it like so-and-so? And you got to figure out, okay, am I going to quilt like that, or I'm going to quilt it like I quilt it? And this is my take on that style. Or else just take it to that person, right? But yeah, I think it's good to be a bit versatile and work with those different. So it's good. I like the challenge.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will give you some quilting ideas for a very challenging modern quilt.
Mhm.
I thought to myself, what would it be like to have somebody standing next to me while I did a project? Because really that's how we learn best. We learn best by doing something. We can sit there and we can listen to people and they can tell us things, but until we actually apply it to ourselves and our own background, we don't learn anything. And so I showed her the project and I said, I want you to help me quilt this. And through this endeavor of making this quilt, I'm going to learn a lot of things. I knew that. And so she immediately, okay, this is what I need you to do. Send me a picture, do this. And so she immediately, it reminded me of going to college when I had a master teacher next to me as I went through a project that I had to complete. I needed guidance and support. I could only do so much on my own. The machine wants you to go through 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. Well, I was missing number 3 step. And if I don't have number 3 step, I can't get any further. And so working with Paige, I learned so much, and it's the little things that you learn. And the way we would start our sessions, we kind of found a routine where we decided what I was going to work on during that time between now and my next class. And so I had homework to do. She's okay, today you're going to do this to this area over here. Whether it was using relocate, borders, working with the nodes, changing up a pattern or something, she gave me a point to start at. And so then I would go and do that. And then the next time I would meet her, the first thing we talked about, okay, what went well and what didn't. So it was great because unless I make those mistakes and I have somebody to support me, I would never figure it out. And so as we went through this, what ended up happening was, as we started our meetings together, we got onto our next quilt, I had less of all those things that had gone wrong. And then I started with, what about this? What about this idea? How do I do this? So I became aware of all the wonderful things that machine is able to do if somebody guided me through the steps. So then I came up with an idea, and then she showed me, oh, you have it all, but you're missing this one step. And so through through doing a project that meant something to me, I learned more from her. I never thought I would be designing patterns or changing patterns, but I was able to do all of that through working with her. And it all, I mean, how many of us want to have, you know, a Paige Johnson or a Karen Farnsworth or a Georgia standing next to us while we do our quilt? And so the money that I've spent, and the prices I think are very reasonable, I really do. And when I look at what it would cost me to fly, you know, Paige to my house and accommodate her to have her next to me, this is the next best thing. And I just, like I said, I think it's just a blessing to have this.
Welcome back, everyone. We are ready to jump into our How Should I Quilt This, where we give ideas for how to quilt a quilt. And we have Lori King joining us today, and she has challenged us with her modern quilt. I think they're kind of sometimes very challenging to come up with ideas for. Lori, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like maybe like where you're from, how long you've been quilting, and your quilt?
Okay, so I am from Colorado. I've been sewing since I was about 8 or 9 years old. My mom started a 4-H club so that I would learn to sew and my sister would learn to sew. And but I didn't actually start quilting until probably about 1990. And so I've been quilting for quite a while, and I've done really well with my free motion quilting on my domestic machine. I now have a Statler, and I'm getting more comfortable doing free motion quilting with it as well. I tend to be I like to take a traditional quilt pattern and try and put a modern twist on it. So that's why I took this class. It was from Leslie Tucker Jennison was the instructor, and the name of the class at Houston 2013 was 50 Shades of Groovy. And so this one's really been a stretch for me. I've got kind of some ideas, but I'd welcome some input. Like I said, this quilt is 8 years old, and I'm tired of looking at it in my stack of unfinished quilts. So I also sent a couple of pictures of the close-ups of the fabrics so that you guys, because that's kind of where I was leaning, is what can I do with the themes that are in these fabrics, and maybe use that for ideas for quilting in the sashing and in that huge background.
It looks really big.
It's 80 by 100.
Oh, wow.
And so I don't necessarily have to make it that long. That's just what the fabric, I thought, well, okay, I'm just going to slap on this fabric, and then, if I want to trim it down later, I will. But
yeah, it's very cool. I love it.
Thank you.
Give me just 1 second here and I'll be ready to share that. I had to change my screen for a sec. Sorry about that. Okay. Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so that is my drawing, and I can't even tell you how many different starts I had to this quilt. I spent way too much time because there is so many options you can go with this quilt. You can emphasize and do each block and then do dense fill in the background. So I was playing around with all kinds of things, and I did take in consideration, like you just talked about, the fabric, in your pieces, in your blocks. And so literally started over and over, probably 10 times. So
welcome to my world.
Well, because, number one, I didn't realize how big it was. So I'm assuming you maybe want to use it as a bed quilt, whereas if it was smaller and you wanted to use it as a wall hanging, like the quilt behind myself, I did a lot of dense background fill. because
Mhm.
it's going to be on the wall. So to make a long story short, this is what I thought of. Essentially, it's an all over with just wavy lines, adding the pearls in there, and this is all done random. You can either, there's similar patterns available if you said you had a Statler. However, probably you can do that free motion much faster
Mhm.
because the lines are random, the spacing is, intermittently, varies. And so by just adding the pearls in there, it kind of I thought would pull together the theme of your fabrics. So, I'm sure the others came up with different approaches. Um, but in the top part, you can see I drew almost like a grid coming out from the strip piecing of your fabric and then just adding wider set wavy lines with larger pearls. Now looking at it, it actually may work just the way it is, with denser coming up and then more wider in the top part. But essentially, in this case, I treated it as an all over. So,
Okay. I like this because, as you were talking, I'm going, okay, so the bottom half is kind of the waves on the ocean with the surf coming in. And then the top is more like the sky with maybe some contrails or something coming across. That's a really cool interpretation. Thank you.
you're welcome.
This one's mine. To me, I feel like those purple strips, there's a sea of background. So
Mhm.
you really probably would want to break it up somehow. So I kind of just use those strips and I would like continue on somehow from them to kind of make some areas that you can put something in. Um, I would, I don't know if you're a marker or not, but I would mark all of this before I started, just even if it was just those areas. And no, I have an elevate. So I was thinking along those lines. What I would probably, in my head, if I were freehanding this entire quilt, I would just use templates to mark all these circles in those areas that I defined. You could add background behind those circles if you wanted to, like I just filled in one. And then it would make those shapes pop out or not. It just depends how densely you want it quilted. But if I were going to do this and use freehand and the elevate, I would look for an edge to edge pattern that's big circles. And there are tons of them. And I would, after I defined those shapes, like those squares and areas with a ruler, I would go back and use my elevate probably.
Mhm.
And if I found an edge to edge pattern, I would just insert one row of it into those areas because it'd make the stitching of the circles much easier. And then I would probably go back and fill around them freehand.
Okay.
And then the background with the 1/2 inch straight lines, to me, then it just kind of unifies everything and it kind of travels behind everything else. And I like that. I think it adds layers to the quilt. The actual blocks, I would kind of put very little quilting because it's kind of the main, visual point of the quilt. So I would want those to be less quilted. And I don't know, again, it's hard for us when we're drawing on them to know the scale. I don't know how big those are. But if they weren't huge, I think just an X through them would be enough.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was from a layer cake, so they're probably about 10 inches.
Oh gosh. So
Or 9
maybe
or 10 inches.
do something else. Like maybe I might even go in there and just do like a 2-inch grid, 1-inch grid on them. And then
Okay.
I think the background area behind some of those blocks, I pebbled on there, but you could do any fill. Again, that would just help to make those squares with less quilting kind of pop out a little bit. Yeah, there's just so much that you can do when you have all that background space. It's just kind of like, idea after idea, I think. I don't know.
Right. That's kind of where I was going was, I've got all this background space. I don't want to just do something boring there.
Right.
I wanted, and that's where I kind of had looked at what can I do with what's going on in some of these fabrics maybe. So I really like this one.
I will tell you too. So my first idea, this was my second one. The first idea was to just take those blocks, and you know how you have like the strips around them. I drew like that. I would just put those as ghost shapes on that whole background, because that would be kind of cool too.
Okay.
And you could actually probably digitize that.
Right.
So that was my take on it.
Thank you. I like this because it does take the ideas from some of the fabrics and, kind of makes the background match up with that, but still it really keeps my eye moving. And so I really like what you've come up with here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So this one is mine, and I am in no way a modern quilter. Okay. I'm a modern quilter by force, apparently. But and I'm obsessed with Jodi's circle pop stencil, and that's the way I always say it. She's a really good modern quilter, and I'm going to use her stuff if it's a modern quilt. But what I did in the blocks is I just did, and now I know they're probably a little bit bigger than that, but I did 4 circle pops. Are they 4 inches?
2.
2. Then there would be more circle pops in each block. And then I just took the purple bars and extended them to create just an area of rest in imaginary directions. So like if it's going behind one and another one, I just connected them so it looks like it's moving behind your fabric blocks. And then from there, I just divvied up the background between the circle pop and then just random circle fill. Not like pebble size, more like, 1 to 3 inch just circles. Especially now that I know it's 100 inches. You could even go bigger than that.
Yeah, that's going to get really boring with lots of tiny pebbles, right?
Yeah. But then in the light gray and the white color, I just did alternating lines in each color. So it's really hard to see in the green.
Oh, I can make that bigger actually, because I didn't even see that either. 1 sec. I can make it bigger. Close up on that spot.
Yeah, I just did them in the opposite directions.
Yeah, I like that.
And that was it.
Would you
Yeah, I was
use
trying
like
to
neon
think-
green thread? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say like that kind of that color of drawing that you did, Karen, that it almost looks like you could use like one of the colors of thread from the fabric, like that lime green.
I wouldn't
And-
though, because then it would compete.
You wouldn't do it.
I would just make texture.
So more just maybe just a shade of gray that's just like 1 shade lighter than what the background fabric is.
Yeah. The only thing I might do is purple, purple thread for the purple bars. That way the eye will pull it. But other than that, everything would be matchy-matchy.
Okay, so where you've extended the purple, would you do some sort of fill with the purple thread or just leave that alone?
I would just leave that alone because
Okay.
that'll be the path for your eye to bring, pull your eye across the quilt.
Okay. Because I think the widest one is like 2 inches wide. So,
You
I
could
think
even
you
just
always
make
echo it. Yeah. Go ahead, Jodi.
or just like 1 line through in
Okay.
the middle, even maybe.
When I get to a situation like that where I have to decide, some of them are wider, some of them are more narrow, I leave that to the very end and then, look at it, is it effective the way it is, or do I need to add maybe just a line through it, like she said, but something like that, you have to leave till the end to see,
I always do that roll trick where I release all the tension off of my rollers and I just let the quilt hang. And if it looks baunchy, it's getting something else. If it's
Right.
nice and smooth, it can stay.
Okay. That's a good idea. Never heard that before. Thank you.
Mhm.
Especially depending on what batting you use. You know, if you use two battings on something like that, then you can maybe get away with it a little bit wider to leave it be, you know, because then it still fills it out more. So, you know,
Okay. Well, you ladies, you've given me some excellent ideas. I can't wait to get started on this. I just have to get the next customer quilt off my frame. So,
You got one
Thank
more
you.
idea coming.
oh, great.
One more, yeah. Okay, so this one was mine. And I did half of the design on this in Creative Studio because you said you had a Statler. So I
Mhm.
did half of it, but you also freehand. So I did half of it in Creative Studio and then I hand drew the rest of it. When you said that you were hoping to take some inspiration from the fabric, I zeroed in immediately on my favorite fabric in the colored squares, and there's 3 of them in the same print but different colors. There's a purple, teal, and like a light gray, and they have kind of like a flying saucer shape, like the shape of the design in the background all throughout it. And that was my favorite. So I don't know, it might be one of those things where if you want to pull inspiration from a fabric, it should be your favorite fabric, but that one was mine. So I immediately thought of Andy's Vortex, which is an awesome edge to edge design. And I used when I did it in Creative Studio, I used the fill function to fill outside a boundary for all of the purple shapes and as well as all of your block section. But if you were going to do it in real life, I'd probably use trim instead of fill.
Right.
And then so that way you don't have all of that traveling going on, right? So and then in behind here, the design actually, the edge to edge design actually continues all the way in to those little spaces. And it might be a little bit fiddly to do, but you're going to save a ton of time by putting an edge to edge on it versus trying to custom the rest of it. So it's either you spend your time here or there kind of thing on any of these suggestions that we're sharing with you. In the background in here around the blocks, I just decided to do like a kind of like a maze, straight lines, because there's so much curvy movement on the outside. So I just thought that a continuing wandering, where is it going to end up, kind of straight line echoing around the shapes of the blocks was kind of cool. And then because you're experimenting and playing more with free motion and the fabrics are busy, it's a great spot to experiment and play a little bit with some of your free motion skills. So you could do something in every block that's here, or you could pick 1 or 2 designs and alternate them to keep it simple. I think Jodi had even said, somebody said about having, if you have a busy area, then an area of rest or something else that's a little bit less complex is a nice balance. So because you've got a simple edge to edge in the background on this one, you could go more dressy in the blocks or simpler in the blocks and more dressy in the background. So it's just another way to look at it. And I did include the name of that design just to make sure that the designer has credit and then you know which one it is. But yeah, that's often what I do is I'll look at one fabric and I'll go, oh, I love that design of that fabric. That reminds me of a pattern that I have, and boom, decision made. So
Perfect. Yeah, I like that design. It really kind of, you know, some of these fabrics, like you said, the one that looked like the flying saucers, kind of outer space kind of thing, and the vortex is just kind of perfect with that. So
yeah, I like that shape a lot. So yeah. Awesome.
excellent. Thank you, ladies.
You are so welcome.
Welcome.
Did you have any more questions for us?
What do you, I mean, like I said, I don't remember if we were actually recording when I said this, but with the, you know, you said it's a huge quilt, and I mentioned that I kind of just slapped everything on. What do you think about the balance itself? I mean, this is a little bit off topic, but you know, should I trim some of that top part off, or should I just leave it?
I would kind of probably think, oh, go ahead.
Can you say that again, please?
Yeah, I'll go, Jodi. Yeah, I'm a believer in it's already together. If you're gonna, it's that big now. Just let it live. You know,
Perfect.
Yeah, and I would probably see, just once you decide how you want to quilt it, then that might make your decision too. I think the balance is good though. I mean,
Okay, good.
Because it's off center, it goes with the whole, theme of what you were trying to do. And, but like Jody said, if you're going, let's say with her option where you do more dense quilting with the 1/2 inch lines that you're going to have to mark, maybe you want to reconsider. Whereas if you go with more of an edge to edge kind of theme, then, if it fits your bed, then leave it.
Okay.
Yeah, if you were going to put that on a wall, like, so it's 80 wide, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you were going to trim it, you could make it square so that it would be on, it would fit a wall space a bit better. You wouldn't have the length for your bed anymore, but you could take it off of the side so that it's the cluster of blocks in the middle is just sitting even. So you would just take the amount off the length to make it a proportionate to the other side.
Right.
That makes sense.
Right.
Didn't it make sense to me?
No, I kind of get where you're going with it. Yeah.
Yeah. You'd have a little bit less work to do with the background, but it depends on what you want to do with the quilt when you're done.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, I mean, I just took this class just to kind of push my boundaries as far as modern quilting was going. So, and here we are 8 years later. So, I haven't really decided what I'm going to use it for. So I guess it depends on how much I like it when it's done. So I have decisions to make now and later. So.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
we can't wait to see what you do. So
Well, oh gosh,
When
the
you-
pressure's on.
when you finish it, you'll have to be sure to share a picture with us.
I will.
Thanks so much for joining us. And I hope some of our ideas can give you.
Yeah, you've given me, all of you, given me some excellent ideas, and I'm kind of, I may be mixing a few of them together. So thank you.
Cool. Lori, I will email you each of the pictures.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Yes, you're so welcome.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that segment on how to quilt that particular modern quilt. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.
Bye.